Well, hey, everybody, welcome to the Weathering Together podcast. My name is Keith Cartwright, and I am glad that you are along today listening in. I have today as a guest my friend Kate Fletcher. Kate is ready to take on this year's version of Kate's Lion Pride Run. Any of you who've been following my journey and my podcast journey the last several years, you know Kate, you know what she's up to. She's getting ready this year to run from Louisa High School, just north of here, all the way up to the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. Kate is a teacher at Louisa High School. She does these runs to raise money for scholarships for some kids who really just need a break. She'll talk an awful lot about what those kids mean to her, who those kids are, and really why this run has become so important to her. So I am glad to have you along. Kate is as much as a runner she is, she's just a really thoughtful person. We always have great deep conversations. That was at least the case in this one, maybe one of our deepest conversations yet, and I'm just really grateful for the experience we had, and now I'm ready to turn you over to that conversation. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Kate Fletcher. All right, I have with me Kate Fletcher, and I don't even know if this is it's at least the third time you and I have talked, maybe the fourth.
I think it's the fourth.
Yeah, and there's I guess a reputation to live up to in this, at least for me, because I always leave these conversations just feeling like I don't know, a better person or just far more energetic about life. You just have well, I think it'll come out here as we talk, but I've been looking forward to this. I was happy to see the new Lions Pride run coming up because my first thought was, yes, I get a reason to get together with Kate. So welcome back for another conversation.
Thank you.
So we will start this by talking about the Lions Pride Run, Kate's Lions Pride Run. And this is what edition of that run is this? I was trying to think of that today.
This is the sixth.
The sixth one.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, this is like a test. This is a test. The first one was like a 50-mile run, right?
Not even actually. The first one, I just wanted to run all day around the high school track. And I remember that for some reason we didn't get started as soon as the announcements were over. I was supposed to be down there and there was some kind of delay. And so I got a little bit of a later start, and then I just ran until the very end of the school day. And it ended up being somewhere between maybe 37 and 40 miles, but I didn't even have a watch. I borrowed someone's Fitbit that wasn't very accurate. And then the next year I made the goal of 50 miles and ran exactly 50 miles around that same track.
And then the next year it was 100 miles on that track, if I remember right.
Yeah.
The following year, I believe, was when you ran through all of the schools in the county.
Yes.
And how many miles was that?
That was about 40. Yeah. But it was the first time I'd gone off the track, and Louisa is pretty hilly. So the terrain made up for the lower mileage from the 50. So it was 10 miles less than the year before, but quite hilly. And yeah, I just ran to each school, and there are 4 elementary schools and a middle school and a high school in Louisa County.
And I remember the pictures of that one because like all the students got involved in that. And I remember there's a couple of you running down the hallway, and so that was sort of generated a lot of school spirit along the way.
Yeah, in some ways that was, I don't want to say my favorite, but because there were, very memorable parts of all the runs and reasons to love all of the runs, but that run got me really in contact with the students. And at each school I ran through the building. And there was one school where I ran into the cafeteria, and there were kids like not jumping on the tables, but little kids kind of jumping up and down on their lunch table seats and high-fiving. And so there was a lot of contact with the kids at each school. Yeah, it was very meaningful.
Then the next year, I believe you ran to our state capitol.
Yes.
Yeah. I've thought about that a lot lately. My boys and I have got into the Rocky movies, like they have never seen them. So the old Rocky. And so in the first one, he runs up the steps at the Capitol. He's kind of, and if I remember, like, didn't they even play that the Rocky theme, I think,
Yeah.
as part of your.
Yeah, so I ran from the high school in Louisa to the Richmond Capitol building, and it was 50 miles, and the high school band was waiting for me at the Capitol. And so it was the high school band that played the Rocky theme song. But I wouldn't have known, because I'm afraid I haven't watched the Rocky movies that carefully. I wouldn't have known. I knew about the run up the stairs, but I didn't know about exactly how he did the end of his little dance at the top.
Yeah.
But I had some time at a park right near the Capitol, the park near VCU there. And my principal showed up, and we just had some time before the politicians were really ready for us at the Capitol. And so in the park, my principal taught me, and there's funny footage of him showing me, and I'm practicing and rehearsing and spinning around trying to get it right. And so it was very important for him because he's a big Rocky fan. So he was very proud that I did it correctly.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess you noticed it was correct.
I know, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
It's very specific.
yeah. And that was it. When was that? Was that 2020?
Yeah. So that one was February 2020, which was exactly a month before COVID hit.
Right.
And actually, it was meant to be later. Originally, that run was supposed to be in March, or maybe even early April. And then what was it exactly? There were politicians meeting and making decisions, and the timing of it was such that running in February made a lot more sense. And it was almost a last minute decision. I don't know, 6 weeks out to go much earlier and go in February. And I'm very glad we did, because it would have all been canceled because of COVID. If we hadn't gone in February, it would have been canceled.
Yeah. And then last year, obviously COVID. Now I remember you and I, well, let me back up a minute. So Kate tell us who you are. What is your role at Louisa?
So I am a high school English teacher at Louisa County High School. This is my 17th year working there. I teach primarily 11th grade, some sophomores sometimes, but mostly American lit, and writing to 16-year-olds primarily.
Yeah, I forgot, like, we've done this so often. Like, everybody knows Kate. And I'm like, no, wait a minute. We're talking about Kate's Lion Pride Run, and it's probably important that folks know who you are and kind of what you're doing. So, and you and I actually ran into each other in 2020 here in Ashland. We were running across Tennessee, pretending to.
Yeah.
And I think at that time we were talking about the next year. And at that time you were hitting about maybe doing 100-miler on a treadmill. I have some regrets that I didn't end up doing it. I don't know if I would have done 100 miles on a treadmill. I might have had that lofty idea back then. Ultimately, I don't think we really felt comfortable asking small businesses in Louisa to make donations at that time during the height of COVID, because they are our primary source of donations. Even though we do get lots of donations from even outside of the county at this point, and we have a GoFundMe site that many people have very generously made donations to, but we still get most of our funds from these small businesses in the county. Most of them are just locally owned. And so the plan had been, well, I could get on a treadmill, and we were going to have fun with it and put me in a room with all the doors and windows shut, but there's a big glass wall, and just somehow drag a treadmill up from where it is downstairs in the weight room, like up on an elevator, and drag it down into this conference room where kids would have been able to pass by and, sort of see the rat on the treadmill and then running her miles. But the fundraising aspect didn't seem quite right to do that. Yeah. And so we just took a break in the end. And I was also teaching from home. I was an entirely virtual teacher for the year and teaching at home. Not that there weren't kids in the building and teachers in the building, there were, but I was one of the teachers that was 100% virtual. Yeah. And so imagine, well, let me just ask. So we're coming up on the latest version of this run. So tell us what the plan is for this run this year.
Okay. So the plan is that on April 4th, which is a Monday, I will leave Louisa County High School at 9 a.m. and I will run to Washington, DC, and finish at the reflecting pool, which is right between the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument.
Which is how many miles?
103.
And so you say you're leaving at 9 a.m. on the 4th. How long do you think that's going to take you to get up there?
It's hard to say. A lot of people, including the sheriff's department that's giving me an escort the whole way, obviously need that information. Like, how long is it going to take?
Right.
And when will you get to Nova
Right.
rush hours? And so I try, but I have had a very hard time judging myself, predicting myself in this way. So I feel like the safe thing to do is to overestimate potentially. But I did that when we went to Richmond, which was part of the reason we spent an hour and a half in a park practicing a Rocky dance move, because I had said it would take another hour and a half to get there.
Right.
I just would hate to be late.
Right.
It's not the kind of thing you want. And there were politicians waiting for us. And I didn't want to be late to that, obviously. So we're saying that I will arrive approximately 24 hours later. And I know we have a permit to be on that section of the mall 24 hours later, but we also have it reserved for a few hours. So it's okay if I'm late.
This one has to, and this is just coming to me. Well, I mean, when I first heard what you were going to do,
Yeah.
like in my mind, the only way to get to DC is I-95.
Yeah.
Like, how's she going? She go run
Yeah.
on the berm on the side of the road? Clearly, you're not doing that. So imagine this one has taken on a whole new meaning when it comes to logistics and planning and just I don't know.
Yeah. Although not as hard as you'd think. I mean, it does sound very overwhelming, and I have to give credit, of course.
It starts overwhelming with 100 miles, but everything, but the logistics in this one.
Yeah. And I want to give credit to the organizers because, and my joke is always, I'm the brawn and they're the brains and I'm the brawn. I have a teacher across the hall who's also an English teacher, Meredith Williamson, and she is the primary adult organizer this year because she is the teacher of the leadership class. And that group of kids in that leadership class do everything. They do the fundraising, they do the organizing, they are selling t-shirts, they're making all of this, they're manipulating social media. So they've got me making TikTok videos.
You have stepped up your game. I said those kids, they are modernizing the Kate Lyon Pride.
I know they got me on
TikTok videos.
On the socials.
Yes,
as they say. So there's Meredith Williamson, and of course, the kids have huge ideas and lots of energy, and then Meredith has to do her part to kind of direct it and contain it as the teacher. And then Carrie Hicks, who has been a teacher in Louisa County just as long as I have, and is actually originally from Louisa County and went to that high school herself, has stepped back this year from teaching for some reasons to do with family, but she is still actually employed part-time by Louisa County Public Schools. And one of her positions is Lion Pride Run coordinator. So she is also from home, and obviously she's coming in sometimes and we're Zooming with her sometimes, doing her share. And she's primarily been the contact with the sheriff's department because obviously they're the ones keeping me safe and making this possible. So there's these two organizers, a whole team of kids, and I just need to run a lot. And then it's not on 95. I did actually consider Route 1 for a long time. And then one day, gosh, a year ago, quite a long time ago, I got in my car and I drove it. And for a while I thought, maybe I could do this. And then there just got to be a certain point where it was another turn into another Wendy's, another turn into, I don't want to advertise for these people, but you get the point. And all these turns into fast food restaurants and strip malls, and I know where I'll be mentally after a certain point, and it's just too dangerous to be trying to keep my eye on cars turning left and for the police to be in charge of that. So Route 1 was not an option. 95 was never an option. Don't worry about that. But what I did, because I'm old school, I'm old school, I went to mapquest.com and do there's a walking man. And I clicked on the walking man and I asked, how would I get to DC from Louisa County High School? And it took some playing with, and eventually I realized I had to divide, for whatever reason, I just had to divide the route into several phases so I could really get a good idea of what to do. And essentially it's in 3 phases. One is Louisa County High School to just outside of Culpeper. And that is, I guess most of that is on 522, which is a local road up in Louisa and Orange and Spotsylvania. And then I'm going to turn east once I get to Culpeper. And I can't remember the names of those highways, but yeah, we got them written down. But I'm going to take some highways, which you might think that sounds dangerous, but the good thing about a highway is that there's a huge shoulder, or these highways have huge shoulders, and it allows cars to easily pass.
Right.
Whereas the country roads are hard because they're narrow, and it makes it harder to get past us. So we've had to take all of these pluses and the pros and cons of the different roads into account, and also the different rush hours for every
Right.
location. So 522, which is a country road, essentially it's a very busy country road, but it is a country road. I'm going to be on there at a time when there really is very little traffic there. And we drove the entire route with the Louisa County Sheriff's Department.
Right.
So a few weeks ago, we took the whole trip. We put the odometer to 0 and it hit 103 at the right place. And we were able to have our police officer, well, he's not just a police officer, but he's got a higher ranking than that. I want to give him his due respect. But Chuck Love, my friend Chuck Love, who works for the Louisa Sheriff's Department, was able to see every stretch of that trip. And there were times when I said, do you think that's safe? And he always said, yes, that's safe. I got you through here. It'll be fine. And we've got the timing of it so that in each location, especially in Northern Virginia, I'm going to be there at a time when traffic is not at its height, ideally, if all goes according to plan. So it's a series of highways between Culpeper and the end of that leg, which is Fairfax Circle, which I imagine to be, I don't know, some sort of wonderland. When we came up with Fairfax Circle, I don't know what I was picturing. It's actually a very nondescript roundabout. It's just a busy little roundabout somewhere in Fairfax. But no offense to people from Fairfax. But at that roundabout, I'm going to veer to the left, go another couple miles, and then there's just a random little residential road that I'm going to turn left on. And at that point, I'm going to get on one of the bike paths up in Northern Virginia. And I'm going to stay on a series of bike paths for the last 14 miles, which is the last leg. So country roads, first leg, highways with a huge shoulder, second leg, and sidewalks. Once you get to Northern Virginia, there are a lot of sidewalks if I need to be on a sidewalk. And then third leg, these paved bike trails. And that will actually run me right over the Arlington Memorial Bridge and to the final destination, those bike paths.
So I think at this point, there are 2 whys that are like appropriate to ask. I'm trying to think of the best order to ask them in.
Yeah.
I think I'll stick with, so we've kind of just gone through the progression of this. Like
Right.
you started one day, the very first year, just kind of running all day. And then we set a goal of 50 miles and then 100 miles. And clearly this has got progressively more difficult to the point now we're breaking it into phases. Fairfax Circle, Washington, DC. Why? Like, I mean, folks would have to maybe be wondering like what was wrong with just 100 laps around the high school track. Why Washington, DC this time?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's lots of different ways to answer that. So Washington, DC obviously has special symbolic value and meaning as the nation's capital. So if you remember that I'd gone to Richmond last time, and that was meant to symbolize going outside of the county for the first time. I left Louisa. I'd done that run to all the schools in Louisa, and then the next year I left Louisa County and I went on a journey through essentially Louisa, Hanover, Henrico, and then into Richmond. but that run was meant to represent like the Commonwealth of Virginia, and
Right.
the Capitol building obviously is symbolic of that. And so it did make sense. I don't know, makes sense seems a little bit too lofty. There's some sort of logic
To
to
you, it makes sense.
there's some sort of logic to like Virginia's capital. Oh, the nation's capital. And again, symbolic of, the country. But I will say this has never been a political run ever in any way. And I do think that's important to say, especially right now
Right.
with, people have so many strong feelings, and there is so much disagreement and a lot of anger. And the last thing I would ever want is for the run to anyway be put in the middle of that, or to look as if it was picking any kind of side on anything, because it's always just been a run to support kids and their potential. That's all it's ever been. I mean, not all as if that's a small thing, but it has been a very neutral, it's not in any way about any of that.
Right.
It's about showing kids first at the high school where I teach, and then in the county where I teach, and then in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and now, ideally on a national scale, that they have more potential than they realize, that they can overcome more than they might think they can, that there is value in taking maybe the harder road, and that they can find meaning in their lives through those challenges. And if their life is challenging, that they can find value and meaning in that and make their life what they want it to be.
There is a lot of, like, I just got some goosebumps a little bit. There is a lot of symbolism in that.
Yeah.
I mean, Louisa County, and I love Louisa County.
Yeah.
But it's very rural.
Yeah.
It's very in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Which is my kind of place, really. And the nation's capitals as busy and filled and active and rich,
Right.
and like there's a start line and a finish line, like they can't. And I think there is some beautiful symbolism too, and we'll talk about it. The kids you're really running for, in terms of some of them feel like this starting line way down here,
Right.
and a Washington D.C. in their life, their finish line seems so far impossible.
Right.
And for a guy like me who does run, like you running from Louisa to Washington D.C. has a fair amount of impossibility.
No, it feels like
ringing
that
to it
too. Don't worry. That's me.
So tell me then about these kids. Like you said, it's always been about these kids.
And maybe I should just say practically, because I don't think we've said it, is that the run raises scholarship money for students. And we've raised over $70,000 at this point in the last 5 years, and this is year 6. We've even given a car away to a kid who needed a car to be able to get to school, who was going to a community college, and he needed a vehicle in order to make that happen. Not a brand new car, it's a used car.
Right.
But what's unique about the Lion Pride scholarship is that it's for good students, of course. It is for students who have some kind of plan for their life after high school, whether it's 2 years of college or 4 years of college or a trade school. So yes, they do need to be students who care about their education and about where they're headed in life. But it's not necessarily a scholarship that goes to, the star athlete who was in all the clubs and is going on, who already has a full scholarship based on academic merit or some kind of athletic achievement. And this is just kind of piling on more to honor all of their great accomplishments. It's always been a scholarship for students who have overcome challenges, who care a great deal about where they're going, and who need that extra support to get there. So we've given it to a very diverse group of kids over these years. And certainly I always feel the need to say this because I have students who sometimes misunderstand. I have kids, Miss Fletcher, is this just a scholarship for runners? Not at all. No, I almost forget that. I mean, I don't forget that I'm running. Obviously, I feel that every step of the way, but it's not really about the running. It's always been more what the running symbolizes. And the scholarship is for kids who are doing the same in their own lives, overcoming obstacles and challenges, facing hills and hurdles, and growing stronger because of it. And we're just helping them get to wherever they are taking that.
So, and for folks who maybe have not listened to our previous conversations, like you're a good runner, but you're a bit of an unusual runner. And so, and by that, I mean, like a lot of runners are into the races. A lot of runners are into times. Like you and I had a conversation once where you didn't even own a watch.
I don't own a watch anymore now.
You counted your laps by you drop pebbles or put a pebble in your pocket to count, and you know how many pebbles you have or how many laps. But the reality is, like if you were out there running races, you would do very well in races, but it's just not been your thing. Like you don't promote Kate the runner. Like I don't see you on Facebook posting your runs or, but this one is a big deal. Like we're talking about TikTok, and your kids are making, like the sheriff is going to escort you 100 miles. Like there's very few people who can line up at 9 a.m. in Louisa County and get to DC on foot in 24 hours. It's just, so what is it about these kids and this scholarship and this opportunity? Why are you passionate enough about that to use this running gift that you're every other day of the year quiet about?
Right.
Why is this cause so important to you to bring your running to life and use it in this way?
Yeah. I mean, I always feel like I should acknowledge that the kids are really giving to me. They're the ones who inspired me to start running. And I've been teaching there, I can't remember if I said for 17 years. And during that time, I've seen kids overcome all kinds of things. And sometimes it's just something academic in my class, a student who maybe has a great deal of trouble passing one of the standardized tests that they need for graduation, perhaps because of a learning disability. And they're willing to put in incredible amounts of time and energy to do something very painful and uncomfortable for them. And that was really what initially inspired me, not even to do the Line Pride run, but to actually start running. I didn't start running until I was 35. I'm 47. And I hadn't been a runner. I'd done track in high school, but very short distances. I have very severe asthma, and that had always kept me from feeling like I could be a runner. And I had a group of kids in one class in particular that was a remedial class for kids who were at risk of not graduating if they didn't pass these difficult tests. And I saw them be willing just to face it and push through it, even though, like I said, I think it was terribly uncomfortable for them, maybe even I'm sure embarrassing, because their peers were passing these tests. And I did have moments where I thought, well, what could I do that would be boring and uncomfortable, and it would take hours of my time, and I don't feel as though I have any natural ability for it. And though now I suppose people look at me and think, oh, of course, she's a runner. On the inside, my lungs for sure are not runner's lungs. I don't know that I have that much natural ability. And everything I've accomplished with running has been, in my mind, through hard work, which is exactly what those kids showed me. Like they might not have been natural readers or writers, but through hard work and endurance, they were able to push themselves to pass these tests. And then as the run has expanded, and I mean, once at that point, there was no Line Pride run. That was just a teacher with her kids feeling like, I should challenge myself because they were challenging themselves. And then it grew into this concept of the Line Pride run. And when I got to a point where we were giving away scholarships with the money that we had raised, and we would sit down and have interviews with these kids. We've always given an interview option for the extroverts and an essay option for the introverts, but they have overcome so many difficult things in their lives. And so that part really has inspired me to keep going further and further. And I don't really see a limit to it. I don't see a limit to their potential, and I don't see a limit to the potential of the run. Yeah. So I know it seems wacky that it's gotten this big, but it seems very natural. It seems like a very natural progression. And all of it is completely different from, racing the Richmond Marathon, right, which I have done many, many times. I usually give myself one race a year, mostly as a training run. And actually this year I did, I actually ran the Masochist 50 miler that has 10,000 feet of elevation gain. I don't know how many of your listeners would know about Masochist, but the name says it all.
Yeah, I feel like every run I run is the Masochist run.
Yeah. And I did another big run called a race called Odyssey. So I don't like to race, but I made myself, I guess that was part of my discomfort, to make myself do these races that would help me to do this big run. Yeah.
So when you and I have had these interviews, these conversations before, they really have been from a running angle. Although quickly, when I was doing these interviews about running, I think I started doing a running podcast and then realized that every runner has a story far more fascinating than running, and that's where it always went. And then that became really the target of the conversations. Yeah. This new podcast I'm doing, you're the third interview in it, is Weathering Together. And it's all about this idea that, and I keep saying, life isn't a you thing, it's not a me thing, life is a we thing. And that's and I think we try to, and we're glamorized this idea that we can go it alone. Independence is this thing. And I see that leading to a lot of unhealthy, results, depression to be one of them, folks' lives. Like, there's a limit to that. You someday realize I can't go alone. And you often do that at the expense of not gathering people in your life. I'm fascinated. And part of the biggest desire in my life right now is to grow empathy. I just think empathy is the key to certainly relationships. This divide you talked about that is so prevalent. Really, I think at the heart of that is not just an inability for us to understand one another. It's a complete lack of curiosity about one another. Right. All that to say, I think that's a really powerful thing you just said, that you started running as a desire to better understand your students who were struggling. I'm not sure, maybe you've said that before, maybe just this time it just struck me far more beautiful than it ever has. Right. And I think that the result of that has been you discovering in yourself that in many ways you're stronger. Now you're sitting here saying, I'm going to run to DC, and who knows like how much bigger there is no limit. Right. How important are the relationships in your life in this run? Where does that factor in? Well,
I mean, just on the most practical level, none of this would be possible without the two organizers that I mentioned earlier, Meredith and Carrie, who are both colleagues and friends, without that group of leadership kids or the culinary arts kids who make the food for the run, or the Louisa County Sheriff's Department, or just the school system that I work for and all the people in it, including obviously my principal. There would be no run, right? It would just be, why would I just start randomly running down the road to DC? None of this all the purpose would be gone from it. And I think that's what we were talking about with racing. And it's not to say that racing isn't important. And it's not to say that there aren't lots of good reasons to push ourselves as individuals in a race. And I know that there are people who can run hundreds of miles for that purpose of pushing themselves individually. in a challenging situation that we call a race to see just how far they can go. For me personally, and maybe this is a weakness of mine, I like to think it's a strength that I need that inspiration and motivation from others. I need to have a reason beyond myself to run that far. I can run the Richmond Marathon just for me, and it feels good. It feels great. It feels, very meaningful to me to finish 26.2 miles and feel spent. But for me personally, to run this far under these conditions, I need a sense of purpose that is beyond myself, that includes others. And not only do they inspire it, but it wouldn't even happen without them. And I think if the run is supposed to symbolize what these kids are doing in their lives, who are overcoming their own challenges and obstacles in all kinds of ways, hopefully that empathy factor is also part of their experience, right? Hopefully the run shows them you can do so much more than you might think you can. You have so much potential if you open your heart to other people, and if you allow yourself to be inspired by other people, and to be to listen to other people, to hear their stories and let them touch you. If you allow yourself to be changed and affected and moved, look at the things that you can do with your life. I don't want them to see the run and just think, well, there's this one woman and there she goes. She ran really far down the road. And so I'll take that and translate it into my life, and I'll just run really far down the road in whatever field or pursuit that I have. I want them to see there's this group of people, and they inspired this woman and sent her and cared for her and, supported her, and that it was something we all did together. That's the meaning of it. That's the beauty of it. So really the takeaway that I would hope they have is, what can I do if I'm part of a community? What can I do if I open myself up to caring about others and letting them care for me?
Because I would imagine, a lot of students that, you talk about, a lot of these students are good students. A lot of them do have dreams and visions.
Right.
They're just sort of missing this opportunity. And my guess is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my guess is a lot of them don't have that opportunity. That's the missing ingredient, because they've just never had a background full of some of the opportunities that a lot of other kids have. And a lot of those opportunities are often in the form of relationships and community in their lives. I don't know if that's
right. Yeah, I think they come from such diverse backgrounds, and some of them perhaps come from situations where life is such a struggle that the people who love them might still not, even with the best of intentions, have the ability, whether we're talking about economically or time, right? If you think of a single parent who's got a job working nights, right? The kind of time and support that perhaps would have helped them more readily or easily to reach their goals. But there's nothing easy about running 103 miles.
Right.
So I don't know that it would be good for every young person in our society to have the easy path to their goals. But I do think that sometimes the people who don't have that easy path think that therefore it's impossible for them. But really, if they can make it on the path that they do have, through those obstacles, that might end up being the more meaningful path, the path that teaches them more, right? because obviously I could choose to just run 5 miles on a flat surface,
Right.
right? I'm intentionally choosing a harder path, a path through narrow country roads and through North Virginia, which, let's face it, that in itself is daunting. And I'll be better off for it. I'll be better off for the harder path. There's that quote, and I don't know who to give credit to, but the quote about the obstacle isn't in the way, the obstacle is the way.
Yeah.
Right? The idea of the meaning is in the obstacle. If there was no obstacle, there really wouldn't be that meaning. And so for some of our kids who maybe haven't had the easiest path in life for all kinds of reasons, and I have so many kids with wonderful families who, with parents or grandparents sometimes, who love them dearly.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's necessarily about families. I think oftentimes people are really doing the best they can,
Yeah.
but it's still just a hard path.
Yeah.
And those kids might think, well, look how hard my path is. How would I make it?
Yeah.
Right. Whereas that kid over there has a pretty easy path.
Yeah.
But sometimes the hard path is the one that obviously it's a bit of a cliche and to just say that what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, but sometimes the hard path doesn't just make us stronger, it makes what we're doing more meaningful. It gives us our purpose.
No, and you and I were talking a little bit before we started recording, and I said this to somebody just today or yesterday about my own life. We were talking about, I went to college and I graduated from Ohio State. I said, that's where I got my degree. I went from that degree in a crazy way of life and spent 13 years working with at-risk kids in a
Right.
residential wilderness program. I say,
Right.
that's where I got my education.
Yeah.
That's where I lean far more on that. The stories of those kids, there were many days that were not easy engaging and living with those kids. But I said to you, wisdom has brought me to this place where I truly believe, like, if we want to grow, if we want to become wiser, and I will even use the word better people, I think we spend so much life trying to avoid the hard path and the pain.
Right.
And I'm thinking more and more, the best route is the pain, is the hard path. Now that's a really difficult thing for folks to grasp hold of, because we spend so much time trying to build comfort into our lives.
Yeah.
And it's futile. I mean, I can speak from experience. It's a futile path. And so I do want to ask you, like, because you said you had students ask, well, Miss Fletcher, is this just for runners? Like, you could be just out there running and doing this to support the track team. You could be using your love for running to support other runners, but you seem to migrate to these kids who've had a hard path. You seem to migrate to kids who've had challenges. And it's been my experience that, I do a lot of work around adverse childhood experiences and trauma. And so I do some trainings, and it always strikes me that I'll be training a room of 25 people.
Yeah.
And all of them have had some challenging, hard paths in their life.
Right.
And so they're just kind of drawn to this work. What is it about you that's drawn to, in Louisa County, these kids who've kind of had a hard, and you can hear it in your voice when you're describing some of them, it's not family, it's just, man, they just have a hard path. What is it about Kate that is just drawn to these kids?
And we've talked about this a little bit, that I definitely had some hard experiences growing up, and difficult family relationships, and a lot of those are, I think, fairly common, unfortunately, for kids, broken families, and maybe parents or step parents or other relatives who are not equipped really to care for care for the children that they need to be caring for. And so those were experiences that I had, that I see reflected in many of my students and just young people in general, because there are so many families struggling to love each other and to stay together and to grow together and not apart. And then I did have one particular experience when I was 15, a very violent, life-threatening experience, a crime that was that happened to a friend and I together, actually on our way home from a high school dance, and I was a sophomore. And that particular experience made me realize, and it wasn't instantaneous, it took decades to really understand what happened that night. Right. But it was a situation where my life was threatened. And I was told that I would be killed. And obviously there was a perpetrator with a gun. And when it was over, I could not believe I was still alive. I was just so convinced I was going to die in those moments. I was told I was going to die. And what I remember the most about that night is that we were told to lie down on the ground and count backwards from 100 when this nightmare was over. And then we stood up and I felt so grateful to be alive. And I think you could talk to almost anyone who's had a near-death experience and they would tell you, maybe it happens over a much longer period of time, like a cancer diagnosis, or I suppose people have car accidents where they might feel something similar. Just so grateful to be still in the world. I couldn't believe I was standing on my legs. I was able to walk away. I was still here. I had this new opportunity, and my friend and I held hands. Again, we were 15 years old, and we ran to her house to call the police. And I remember that run, and I was not a runner. I remember feeling free. And I know it's a strange thing to say because something very terrible had just happened to me, awful. And I don't want to minimize what had happened to me. But I felt so free and so alive because I had just gone through these moments where I imagined that this was the very end. And in the years that followed, again, it's not like instantly I became this person who valued every day, every moment of every day. I mean, I was still just a kid. I was just 15. And I made all kinds of decisions as an adult that in some ways came out of that night that perhaps were not the best decisions for me. But ultimately, I ended up on a harder path because of that evening. And I wouldn't, obviously I wouldn't wish that on anybody, that particular path, but that harder path absolutely made me who I am. And that harder path absolutely made me a teacher. I think that path made me a runner. I don't think it was a coincidence that I felt alive and free and in my body when we ran together. And that was very important because in those moments I hadn't felt in my body. It was so disturbing, of course, like many people, I had sort of evacuated my body, almost like you would evacuate your house if it was on fire. And being able to feel my legs and breathe and run, as we all know, well, those of us who are runners, I know your podcast isn't just for runners, but it brought me back home into my body again. And these years that I've been a runner, which is going on 15 years now, I feel it each time, this sense of being fully in my physical safe self, like my mind and my heart, my spirit and my body integrated in a way that running has allowed me to feel. And I need running for that. I need running to help me feel that way. And part of that is the discomfort of my feet pounding on the ground and my heart beating and my pulse in my, in my neck and in my wrists, and sweat and cold and shivers, and the discomfort of running makes me feel whole. It makes me feel who I am as a person, as a body and a mind and a heart and a spirit. And being whole and alive is uncomfortable. It really is. And the students that I teach have all kinds of adverse experiences. There's so many ways that things can go wrong, so many ways things can go wrong. And they've had all of them go wrong. I mean, I've taught thousands of students at this point, and the ones that apply for the scholarship and that we're so glad to help out in whatever they hope for their futures, are students who I think also, even though they're not runners, are looking to put themselves together, to find that sense of wholeness, to feel as though they are reaching their potential. And what is potential really but becoming a whole person, becoming the whole person that you're meant to be. And even though they might not be running to get that, to do that, right? Whatever their passion is, their interests, their pursuit that gives them that sense of wholeness and meaning, I want to support it and be there for them. And that's full circle to where other people come in, because I think we all need, I had my friend Adriana, we were holding hands. We needed each other. I'm eternally grateful that we were there for each other that night. And I want to be a person who's there holding these kids' hands, in my own way, helping them to find their potential as a whole person.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
I just, you shared something that I know is hard. So I'm just proud of you. You said a couple of times in there that their journey is about becoming whole people, putting themselves together. Mm-hmm. Do you see that as sort of your personal journey since that night when you were 15? Has your journey been sort of putting yourself together and maybe pouring life into these kids? Has that been part of that process?
Yeah, I think so. And I think being this teacher and runner for them, because I've created this unusual life where my running and my teaching come together, right? Yeah. Which is very unusual, but I've managed to orchestrate it, not with, I didn't know 15 years ago I would orchestrate it that way. I didn't even think I'd be a teacher. If you'd asked me, even right out of college, I had no intentions of being a teacher, but intuition, I think mostly, has guided me and put these pieces together. And part of becoming the whole version of me that reaches my own potential is to help them. Yeah. But we all have people, teaching is such an obvious profession to have, to help others. But I think we all, no matter our work, or maybe we don't work, maybe we're home raising our own children, we all have so many opportunities to be one of those people in someone's life. Hopefully not just in one person's life, hopefully, in the lives of all the people around us. We all have that ability to just be there as a support as they do their own run.
No, and I think, and that's why I love that, where you're getting ready to run from Louisa to Washington, D.C., to the nation's capital, to this big, just spectacular scene. But to go back to, it started with, you weren't a runner. Like, it started with,
Yeah.
my kids are experiencing hard things. What can I do that's hard? And now, I think that's even more powerful when that we know you had been through a lot of hard
Yeah.
stuff. So I think it's just very, I don't know, poetic in a way, that's sort of how this started. And I don't want to project it, but I have to. I think it's a beautiful thing that there will be a finish line in DC. And as a runner, I know, like, I've never run 100 miles, but I've run some races that are a whole lot further than I had any right to be running. And there is that feeling at the finish line, oh my God, this is done. I did it. But you get like another finish line. Imagine it's more powerful, maybe. You get to hear these kids' stories, give them this opportunity from the money that's raised from that. And I have to, I have to imagine that's a fairly powerful post-finish line when these kids get this opportunity.
Right. And we have an award ceremony every spring, and that's the point where I get to stand up and go to the microphone and call out their names. And I, get to say a few words beforehand. And I always say some version of, finally I've arrived. Like, this is the end of the run, the night that I get to do this. And actually, I will say, the kids and their socials, of course, they have hashtags. And the hashtag that they've actually selected that they keep adding to all of their posts is no finish line. Hashtag no finish line. And there's a funny reason for it, and then a more poetic reason for it. The humorous one is that when we first started planning the run and we applied for the permit, we wrote on there, it was like, what is the nature of your event? And the organizers, Meredith and Carrie, wrote this, they carefully wrote out what was going to happen. And there's a teacher, and her name is Kate Fletcher, and she will run from Louisa County High School to the reflecting pool. And that's where her finish line would be. And they wrote back right away, no. There are no finish lines except for the Marine Corps Marathon allowed on the National Mall. There can be no finish lines. And they were dead serious. Like, they did not approve the permit. There are no finish lines except for Marine Corps allowed on those premises. They were very clear about it. And so we jokingly said, okay, we took our paperwork back. Kate Fletcher will arrive at her not a finish line. So for a long time, we had this joke about when I get to the no finish line. And then the kids on their own completely flew with it. And they were like, Miss Fletcher, don't you get it? No finish line. Come on, don't you see it? And meaning, of course, there really is no finish line. There's always, it's not like you end and then you say, well, okay, I'm all done. I'm the, the highest version of myself. I'm totally self-actualized. And now I'm going to go to bed for, the next 3 years. There's not really that one moment. There's always the potential. And I talking about running 103 miles and potential and pursuit and all of these very lofty goals. I do want to say I am not a type A personality in any way. In fact, I would say I'm largely an underachiever. I don't have an amazing work ethic. I wish I did. I hope to. I aspire to, sort of. I don't put in the work. There's so many ways that I'm not that really driven person running to DC or running up the mountain. But I don't think it's really about that. When I'm talking about reaching our potential, I don't mean it. I always think it's important to say this. I don't mean it in like a hardcore, and with all respect to David Goggins, who you and I both know. I don't know how many listeners would know. I have so much respect for him, but I can't be him. I'm just not that. I'm not built that way. So I mean potential in a much broader, perhaps more gentle way, that I think it takes a lifetime. There is no finish line. We're always working towards it. We're doing what we can when we can. And yes, I did a little Rocky dance, but I'm not hardcore like Rocky either. I'm a pretty easygoing, gentle soul, really.
Right.
And running doesn't feel like a hardcore activity to me.
Yeah.
Running is something I love,
Yeah.
and it does hurt, but it also is deeply meaningful to me and gives back to me so much. It's not like I'm just out there to suffer.
Right.
The suffering, which is definitely there, and we should do an interview afterwards so we can talk more about the suffering.
Right.
Because I'm sure I'll have a lot to say about it. But I accept the suffering, just like I accepted the suffering that night as this is something I'm going to have to survive. But I prefer to run towards the meaning and the beauty, and purpose and meaning and beauty don't have to be, have nothing to do with perfection or with reaching some crazy goal or with the admiration of other people. To me, it's just about finding a meaningful path in my own life and feeling myself stitched together, feeling whole like I do when I run, and trying to share that with others and support them in their search to find the wholeness in themselves.
Yeah, and that's so beautiful. And I'll have to go back and look. It may have even been titled No Finish Line, but I always talk about my first marathon, the Richmond Marathon.
Yeah.
And I was, I don't know, a year or two into my running journey at that time. But I always say it was life-changing for me. And you'll read a lot of people say, run a marathon's on my bucket list. And that was sort of how I approached that marathon. Like, I just want to check it off. I want to say I did it. All these people, the 1%, whatever that is. But a strange thing happened when I crossed that Richmond Marathon finish line. For a brief moment, I just did it.
Yeah.
But the bigger revelation, the bigger reality was I entered I walked through a door where there was this big question, what else is possible?
Yeah.
And I think that's it. Waking up every day, asking what else is possible.
Right.
And and at that time, like, life was running, and what else is possible did have some running, but this podcast, I would not be doing this. I never even knew what a podcast was when I did that. And I didn't have the courage or the willpower but I just, it was like, well, that sounds like a good idea.
It's an opening.
And now my writing now, like, I write far more than I ever did. But every time I sit down and write, and I'm wondering, like, well, what else is possible? And I'll read something I wrote yesterday. I'm like, I kind of like that. I wonder what I can write.
Yeah.
So, and it's not about, I'm a lot like you. I'm not like, I don't sit down and plan out, and I don't have goals, and I don't have, I have found more success in my
watch.
No, I do have a watch.
I had one, but it broke and I never got another one.
I'm okay with waking up every day now, and I've reached a place in my life where it's far more than ever, just waking up and wondering what is possible for me today. Like, and I think that gets back to a lot of this, who being curious about me, being curious about what I can become, and I hope in the process challenging other people to wonder that about themselves. So,
well, I think before this all started, we talked briefly about running as an opening. And I think, obviously I'm an English teacher, so I hear you with the writing. I think there are a lot of parallels between running and writing, because there's a lot of discomfort in writing, if you're honest, if you really try to say something honest.
Right.
And I think both of those are openings, and you don't know where they're going to lead. And I think that can make people feel uncomfortable. So the people who want to know what the ending looks like.
And it's I'm not sure I'd ever thought of it in that parallel, but I have said the last couple of years, just through different journeys in my life, I've said and I've been writing off and on for 15 years.
Yeah.
But up until the last couple of years, I say I always wrote around the edges of my life. Like that was the
Right.
easy stuff.
Yeah.
Like running is an easy thing to write about because I could write about the race and didn't have to
You
dig
could do a race recap.
didn't have to dig far. But the last couple of years, like I've been writing about the insides of my life. And to
Right.
your point, sometimes that's hard. There's some stuff like it's
Right.
hard to, but there's been two things I've discovered about that. One is that it has been more fulfilling. It has
Right.
helped me discover possibilities about myself far more than anything I've ever written about.
Right.
And then the other thing that has been equally, maybe even more interesting to me is in response to this writing the last couple of years, I've had far more people reach out and say that I connected to that.
Yeah.
And what they're really connecting with, what they really are wishing about themselves, and I hope is encouraging them. It's not the words I wrote. I mean, the words have some draw into it.
Yeah.
It's that willingness
To
to go
open.
in there,
Yes.
to do that
Yeah.
hard thing, to go in. And there are so many people out there I'm discovering who are living with this person inside themselves for
Right.
whatever reason,
Yeah.
doesn't get to wonder what is possible,
Right.
doesn't get to express it.
Right.
And so the fact that you're using this running to let those kids at such an early age where things can get trapped in, where we can
Right.
start to build a prison around us, that you're drawing them into possibility. I just think it's a beautiful thing.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So where do you ever, I mean, you
You
just,
can ask me where I'm going next.
well, I am, but I mean, you just said that, I mean, yes, it's a logical question. We just, we did the sequence where you've gone, but I'm more interested in like, I mean, not to get too far ahead of yourself, but well, we can go backwards, I guess. How, like, what's this process start after you ran to the Capitol? When does your mind allow yourself to start working on like what is next? Does that happen when you're out on a Saturday just running around? I mean, because for me, like I get a lot of crazy ideas when I'm running.
Yeah,
Like,
no, it's already started happening.
Right. So,
I
but
do.
what is that process like? Are you always can it be called dreaming? Can it be called, I don't know how you start imagining.
Well, I mean, like with everything else involving this run, there are all these other people, and a lot of them have given me suggestions. So just yesterday, I was downstairs, in the mailroom, and the secretary, Mrs. Runnett, came out and she said, "I have an idea for you." And it's a great idea.
Yeah.
She said, "How about next year?" And for those who don't know where Louisa really is, it's halfway between Richmond and Charlottesville. It's northwest of Richmond. And she said, "Why don't you run over toward Charlottesville and then just run to the top of one of the mountains out there?"
Yeah.
And so I need to look on a map.
Yeah.
I like the idea, and I love trail running, and I spent my whole summer on trails.
I do too.
So the idea of pounding the pavement all the way to DC, it's one of the other, the hard parts, the struggle part that I know I need to embrace, and I will find strength in that part. But I do love a soft trail, and obviously metaphorically the idea of ending on a mountaintop. I just don't know what the mountain would be. I know if I drive west from the high school toward Charlottesville, I see mountains. Right. They look very far away.
I go over there quite a bit and climb some mountains over there.
I climbed the Priest over there.
Yeah.
And a few others. I just don't know how far away they are from the high school. This is the first time I have felt that we have really reached symbolically, maybe, at this moment, it feels like the pinnacle, like the ideal symbol to run to the reflecting pool. And that in itself, because of course I could have run to any number of places in DC. But the reflecting pool was our final idea, because again, the run is really about finding our potential and looking within. And of course, there's the looking into the water concept. It's definitely not political in any way. So there was no government building that really made sense for the run. And I don't know if we can really beat that reflecting pool location as a symbol. But there's also the opportunity to have a sort of homecoming back at the old gravel track, and maybe next year just do a Lion Pride Run homecoming and not have the sheriff's department out there on a 103-mile parade route. They're wonderful and amazing, and it's such a kind, generous gift to me to be willing to protect me going that slowly for 103 miles. But to just have it at the track and people can show up, I'm picturing people like having a barbecue and playing tennis while I'm doing my loops. So it might not be the same showiness, but it'd be kind of homegrown, back to our roots. So I don't know.
Well, I always look forward to it. Like I said, I got excited when I started seeing y'all started dropping hints, and they're, next week we'll make the announcement. And so
the kids had fun with that.
And they've, like I said, I will definitely, when we share this, I'll definitely point folks to where they can donate to the scholarships and be a part of helping on that ultimate finish line of this year's race. So we can
finish line
of awards night, when you can, present.
That is truly the finish line at the awards night
for this race, but it's not the finish line. But I just thank you. Like I said in the beginning, these are, and this is, been as meaningful as any of them. You're just you're a good. I just think you're a great person, and I just appreciate the heart that goes into what you do. And I do know, like I couldn't, like every time I do any sort of a hard run, I mean, Souls for Souls has been at for the last 3 years. I have to have some sort of, like, I can't go out and just endure the pain just for the sake of endure the pain. There's got to be something in my ear saying this is bigger than the pain. And I appreciate that you're bigger than is some really lucky kids and a really lucky community, and they clearly all rally around you, and you're equally appreciative of them. So I appreciate you coming.
Thank you. I appreciate you and for putting this out. I know I enjoy and I need to listen to the last two. I enjoy listening to these podcasts for the same reason that you're probably putting them out there, to hear what inspires other people and keeps them moving towards becoming their whole person in their world.
It's a very selfish endeavor. I don't ever hide that. Like, these make me better. Like, I get to dig into.
But you share it. It's not selfish if there's this big microphone.
Right. No, and I do. And I just hope if one of the consequences of my selfishness is other people get to be better in the process by hearing the questions that I'm lucky to ask you, then that's a good thing. So I can't wait till we do this again next year.
Yes, definitely. And I hope we'll talk to after the run.
We'll have to. We'll have to. All right. Thanks. Well, hey, all, thank you for listening in to my conversation with Kate. I hope you picked up on why I absolutely love getting together with her, really digging deep into some of the conversations we get into. She knows the hard path in life. She's been there. She's learned from it. She's gained wisdom from it. And I just love the way she communicates what she has learned along the way. It's no doubt why she is such an influence on the students there at Louisa High School, why they rally around this journey she goes on every year. This year, 103 miles from Louisa High School to the nation's capital. I absolutely look forward to following her journey, starting at 9 a.m. on April 4th, completed at sometime around 9 a.m. on April 5th. So check in with me and follow along with her. You can follow Kate and Kate's Lion Pride Run. I believe they have their own page now on Facebook. I know they're on TikTok. So follow and find and follow Kate. You will not be disappointed, and you will probably be very inspired, if not to run 103 miles of your own, to, like she said, just find this place in your life and the things you are doing to pour into others. So also encourage you, go check out weatheringtogether.com. I have a couple of things coming up. The first of which is going to be a study I'll invite you into, looking into the book, what happened to you. Really at the root of this whole idea of weathering together, a lot of it came from that book. That book really encapsulates a lot of the work I do in life today. So I'm going to offer you a chance to take a 5-week journey into that book, which will really be part course, part book club, and we'll just kind of see where that goes. So I'll be inviting you along soon. Details of that will be at weatheringtogether.com. Until then, I hope you all have a great rest of the week. I hope you'll come back next time for the Weathering Together podcast. You all have a good day.